Eat, Drink and Be Married is not a bad film. I love real one films, and generally this didn't disappoint, but there were a few things that I didn't love. And one's a spoiler, one's not so much, but I'll keep the spoiler until the end. This was released in 2019. It's directed by Heather Hawthorn Doyle, and it stars Jocelyn Hudson as Billie, Jake Foy as Charlie, Sam Robert Muik as Max, and Sydney Scotia as Jess. And Billie is a wedding planner. She's actually got this really interesting business for basically where people donate their wedding things, and it's really fascinating content. I'm not doing a good job of describing it. The film does a better job, and that part of it I thought was quite unique and something a little bit different and quite inspiring. And this couple, Jess and Max, approach her one day to plan their wedding, and the next thing we know, they've cancelled their wedding. And obviously, that's not what people expected. And Max's brother, Charlie, kind of thinks it was Billie's fault. It's not Billie's fault, but he finds it suspicious that they cancelled the wedding the day after visiting her. And he tells her that she's got to help fix it. So she kind of agrees because she does want the best for them and does want them to get married. And the film is basically about Charlie and Billie trying to convince Max and Jess that actually they do need to be together, and that weddings are stressful, marriage is difficult, but if it's true love, then you should work it out. And honestly, I feel like this isn't a problem that I had, just an observation. I feel like they were sticking in where they really shouldn't have done, because they're basically forcing this couple to be together when they've reached a point where they don't know if they want to get married. You should never force somebody to get married, because you can easily get married later once you've had more time to think about it. It's much harder to undo a marriage than it is to plan it for later. So I don't agree with their motivations or their plans, but it did make for a pretty good film. And Billie and Charlie were both really likeable. The bit that I didn't really care for, and this may sound weird because I enjoyed the film, but I didn't enjoy the bulk of the film. I didn't enjoy the way they went about it, getting Jess and Max to do all of these different activities to try and make them realise they loved each other. It just felt unbelievable. And I struggled to get behind the events within the narrative. But at the same time, the events themselves were really well shot. There's a photography session that was really nice to see, a scene in a restaurant that was kind of short-lived. But in general, each scene on its own was good. Each activity was quite interesting. But this overarching concept of trying to get them to do these activities just felt too unrealistic for me. So I think if they'd maybe thought about it a little bit longer and a little bit harder, they could have come up with a more natural way to make the narrative move forward. And if I believe it more, I'm more emotionally invested in it. And to be honest, even though the characters are really realistic and, Jess and Max are very likable, I never really cared that much about them, which sounds horrible, but I think it's because we never really got a chance to know them as individuals. We never really got them on their own that much. There are some conversations between Charlie and Max and Billie and Jess, and those scenes are really good, but I think we should have had more of those to dig a little bit deeper into their characters and why they were pulling away from each other. Maybe I'm asking too much for a rom-com, but the point is these are things that I think could have made the film just a little bit more meaningful and a little bit deeper and a little bit easier to connect with the characters. The other thing that I didn't like, and this is something I hate, so it's a spoiler, I'll discuss it in a second actually, I'll sum up very briefly first of all. Beautifully shot, the casting is great, everybody on screen looks really great together, the performances are really good, there are a lot of wedding things in this. I say that because sometimes rom-coms will use the wedding aspect to market the film, and then there's basically no wedding in it, no wedding planning, nothing like that. For a couple who have called off their wedding, they managed to get a lot of wedding things in this. So that part of it did work well, which is why I think they went with that. That idea to get Max and Jess doing these activities is to help keep that wedding feel. So I appreciate that. But again, I don't think it was necessarily a very believable way to approach things. So I can understand that. And that is definitely something that works in the film's favour. There are a lot of wedding things in this and a lot of really lovely discussions. It got a little emotional at one point. I know I said it could have been a bit deeper and more moving if we got to know Jess and Max as individuals more, but Billie's parents, they provide, especially her father, provide a source of emotion. And I don't want to say too much about that. I don't want to give it away. But there is a certain deepness to the film in parts. And of course, we have the romantic relationship developing between Billie and Charlie, which I really liked. And I thought they worked really well together. So in all, it is a good film. Definitely room for improvement. But it's a real one film. Absolutely the quality one can expect from a real one film. And ultimately, I enjoyed it. So, big spoiler now for something that I hate, and it can make me detest a character. And from this point, I didn't like Billie. And thankfully, this happened, I think, within the last 15, 20 minutes. Basically, Charlie, as I said, big spoilers from now. Charlie convinces her to help, and she agrees because he can help save the building that she's in that's supposed to be going up for sale, and she obviously can't afford to buy it out. And unfortunately, things fall through completely out of his control. Things don't go to plan. And the second Billie finds out about this, she calls him a liar and goes in a mood and basically has a little temper tantrum, never once considering that this was out of his control, never once considering that he might want to apologise and explain things to her. She just spat her dummy out, stomped her feet, and behaved like a little brat. And from that point, I hated her. And I've mentioned it many, many times. A character overreacting in a rom-com can really ruin usually the final 20 minutes of a film. And I'm always really nervous watching rom-coms because I love them. You know, things like other Real One films, Hallmark, Lifetime, whatever. Sometimes characters can overreact and it can just make me hate them because I don't understand how they can be so narrow-minded. And there was no reason for Billie to think that Charlie had intentionally done this. And she was just behaving like a child. So, hated her after that. That's not to say she doesn't come around or anything, but still, as soon as a character does something like that, it ruins a film for me. I mean, it doesn't. It ruins a minute of a film for me. But other than that, definitely a film that I really enjoyed, and obviously one that I'm happy to recommend.